In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, Amen. Archaeologists, paleontologists, anthropologists tell us as the world changes, species must adapt. As the world changes, species must evolve or die. This is not an opinion, and this is not a feeling strongly kept. This is not a conspiracy. It's not a finding funded by a special interest group. Over time and across unconnected parts of the world, the scientific community has come together and amassed empirical evidence, carefully collected, carefully collated, has taken this data, which demonstrates beyond a reasonable doubt that adaptation to change is required for survival. Examples of creatures that have not been able to adapt or evolve effectively include the dodo, the saber-toothed tiger, the woolly mammoth, the T-Rex, Steller's sea cows. Steller's sea cows were first discovered in 1741, and by 27 years later, they were gone forever. The West African black rhino, which lived and moved across this earth for eons and ages, disappeared in 2011, never to return. For species still here, we often miss how they are adapting and how they are changing as the world continues to rotate on its axis age after age after age. We miss how they're changing. We miss how they are evolving. Consider for a moment human societies. In the beginning of our existence, when we first appeared on the earth, when we were living in caves, when we were discovering fire, when we were fashioning rudimentary tools, we were primarily in survival mode. And we were tribal, and we were violent, and we were tribal, and we were violent. And even our faith history documents this tendency. The epic story, the grand myth of our very first family, Adam and Eve and their 3 sons, Cain and Abel and Seth, ends with Cain slaying, Cain murdering, Cain dispatching his brother Abel. And generations later, we move from fratricide to exile. Abraham separates his 2 sons, Isaac and Ishmael, and he sends one of them far away into hostile environs, and he keeps one of his 2 sons close at hand in a much more hospitable land to thrive under much easier circumstances. And later still, the human family moves from fratricide to utter exile to just mere betrayal when brother Jacob steals his only brother's inheritance. Tribalism, looking after me and mine versus you and yours, is our beginning, and its roots run deep. Its roots run deep within us. When we had walked long enough on this earth, our faith narrative tells us that God intervened and through Moses gave us another way to navigate our relationships, another way to ensure our survival. God gave us the law. And the law would help a people organize their interactions within a community and normalize their relationships between tribes. The law would protect widows and orphans, help preserve culture and heritage and tradition and values, help protect those when a people found itself captured and ransomed by an invading horde. After a time when a mighty nation was established, the law became managed in the details with a disregard for the spirit in which it was conceived. And then again, God's movement was perceived. And Jesus came among us, and Jesus loved us, and Jesus taught us, and Jesus gave us a new truth. Humankind, you are old enough now. You have been in the world long enough now. You are mature enough now. You are evolved enough now to understand God's view and God's vision and God's will for you. Know this. You are the Lord's possession. You are all His beloved. You are all one in Him. You are all one in God. This is the new truth. This is the new truth. Put down those affiliations to your tribes. You are the Lord's possession. You are all one in God. But before the truth seeped in, and before the truth found its way into our hearts and claimed our consciousness, the Son returned to the Father and left the message, this new truth, in the hands of the disciples. And they went to the four corners of the earth with this truth. And they proclaimed it. And it took shallow root some places, no root at all others. And we hear from our epistle this morning that Paul, speaking to the faithful Galatians, tells it to them yet again. Listen, people. Listen. There is no more tribalism, and the law is not the pervasive thing. There is this one truth. You are the Lord's possession. You are all one in God. There is no more Jew or Gentile, free or slave, have or have-nots, potentate or orphan, male and female. Those are insignificant qualities. Those are like eye color. They just don't matter. What matters, what is essential, is that you are the Lord's and we are all one in God. This is the important thing. God commands us to love one another because we are all His. Hold on to that. Hold on to that. It is up to you, Galatians and Corinthians and Romans and Hebrews, to claim this and live into this and make it so. It is up to you. It is up to you. And brothers and sisters, how are we doing with this charge? How are we doing with this charge? We are all one in God. So, all I hear, all I read, all I see before me from the various aspects of all kinds of media is that we have believers and non-believers, and we have progressive Christians, and we have fundamentalists, and we have Republicans, and we have Democrats, and we have pro-life, and we have pro-choice, and we have gun rights, and we have gun management, please. We have gay, we have straight, we have isolationists, we have all-in police of the world. We have angry, angry, angry people. We have scared, scared, scared people. We have people that go to a Bible study and a year ago are mowed down by a broken human being. And we have people gather to have a mojito at night in a nightclub in Orlando, never to leave again. How are we doing? How are we doing that we're all God's possession? Don't see much evidence that we're doing very well. And we could be very, very despairing if it's left up to us. And I was despairing. I was despairing. And then, in the middle of the week, I came across this really interesting thing. So, there are these two DNA companies, and there's this worldwide travel agency that called together people for this thing called the DNA journey. They called together and they put in the room 67 individuals. 67 individuals from all over the world, all races, all nationalities, all ethnicities. They had never seen each other before. They had no connection to each other. 67 people. And one by one, they asked them to come down and sit at a table in front of two DNA specialists. And they said, "Who are you?" And the first man said, "I'm English. I've always been English. My parents are English, grandparents are English, great-great-grandparents are English. I'm English. It's the greatest country in the world. It's the greatest people in the world. My whole family has served this country and these people, the English people." And they said, "Well, are there any people that you don't care for, that you don't like?" "Don't care for the Germans. Don't like the Germans." They called another woman. Oh, and you could tell, you looked at her. She was French. She was French. She says, "I'm French. I've always been French. My parents are French. My grandparents are French. We're French. We're French. And all the way back, we're French." And they said, "Are there people that, or people, a nationality, a country, some people that you don't care for?" "Oh, we don't like the British." No. And they called another person, and the man came and he said, "I'm from Bangladesh. I am so patriotic. I love my country. I love my people. I am all in. I'm Bangladesh." "Are there people you don't care for?" "Oh, I don't like Pakistanis, and I don't like Indians." You know, that's sometimes when we hear that, we think that's like somebody from Alabama saying they don't like people from Georgia. I mean, we don't, it doesn't seem all that different to us, but it was different to him. And they called up another man had dreadlocks. He says, "I'm Cuban. All my people are Cuban. I love Cuba." And they called another woman up, a young woman, and she said, "I'm Kurdish." And she opened up a photo album, and she showed pictures of her grandparents getting married. And she said, we're Kurdish." And he said, "Are there people you don't like?" "Oh, I don't like Turkish. I don't like the Turks." And so it went. And so they said, "Well, would you be interested in finding out, from your DNA, would you be interested in finding out all about your ancestors and your relatives?" Well, the English guy says, "No, what are you going to find out that I don't already know?" And they said, "Well, you might be interested. If so, just spit in this tube." Spit up to the line. And so 67 people spit up to the line in a vial each, and those 67 vials went out. And 2 weeks later, the results came back, and the 67 were gathered back in the room. And one by one, they called them forward. And it's really interesting because as sure as they were about who they were and where they came from and who their people were, as they sat down to open up the envelope, they said, I'm nervous. I'm nervous. Why? They were so sure. And they opened up, and the French woman looked, oh, les merde! So she was 30% French, but she was 35% British. And the English guy opened up, and he was 27% English, but he was 37% German. And I didn't tell you, but there was another man who was Icelandic, and he says, I'm Icelandic, and I got to tell you, we're the best people in the world. I'm superior to you. I don't even know you, but I'm better than you because we're Icelandic. And he opened it up, and, oh, Italy, Spain, Portugal. He says, Belgium. And he says, well, Iceland moved a lot closer to Europe. And the Kurdish woman found out that she was over half Turkish. And the DNA expert says, open that whole profile up, and they saw how many, from across the globe, there were circles of where their bloodlines were, where they came from, over and over and over again. He says, in essence, in the broad scheme of things, we're all cousins. He says, but in particular, there are two cousins in this room. And the Kurdish woman and a man who had just found out he was a Muslim Jew were actual cousins. So, brothers and sisters, we are all one in God. That's not up to us. God is already making that so. He's moving. He's moving. We are all part of one another in the community of God. And the question is, how do we detest the essence that's running through us? The blood of our enemies is blood going through our veins. We don't have to affect this one in God. God's making it so right now. We are evolving to God's plan without our impetus. So the question is, what do we do with that? Evolve or die. Our purpose is to be one in God, and it's happening. All we're required to do is not resist, to breathe, and to pause, and to be a little bit kinder and a little bit more gracious to the other. Tribalism is dissipating age by age. Take the long view and be a little kinder. Do we really have to say? Do we really have to post that thing about someone who disagrees with us? Does it have to be said? Can we just hold it? Can we just hold it and be a little kinder to our brother and sister, our cousin? Can we trust God's good action and God's adaptation and God's evolving within us? Can we hold on to that hope? Can we trust that movement? Because brothers and sisters, between the two, between being a little kinder and a little more gracious, to be better and be with God all in one, is that not the better way? Or do we want to end up like the dodo? Amen.